Here at the U.S. Social Forum, Who Decides About War? We have an excellent panel here to lead us off in this discussion. But before we do that, I'll introduce myself. I'll just say that my name is Ben Manski. I'm Executive Director of the Liberty Tree Foundation for the Democratic Revolution, which is a pro-democracy group. We've worked in partnership with everybody who's on the panel here and also many other organizations in building a campaign that until recently was called Bring the Guard Home, It's the Law. That campaign recently changed its name, and we're now going under the name Safeguard the Guard, Safeguard Democracy, which is a little bit more descriptive of what we're after here, is building up the National Guard as an alternative to the Pentagon and to a military design for wars of empire. This is part of a mini track here at the U.S. Social Forum, which is the democracy track, and we have a whole series of sessions that are happening throughout the week. There is a People's Movement Assembly tomorrow that is on constitutional reform. It's on amending the Constitution. It's inclusive not only of abolishing corporate personhood, but also of other amendments, including perhaps a people power over war amendment, which has been proposed in this movement more recently. So I want to invite people to come to that. I also want to let people know that many of the panelists here, in fact all of them were invited. George Martin was invited, but was at another conference overseas, but all the panelists here, aside from George, attended and spoke at Who Decides About War, which was a major conference at Georgetown Law School that took place last October. And we do have videos that are available for $5, basically just at cost. So I want to make those available. You can also order them through Liberty Tree. So basically what we're going to do today is, first I'm going to introduce our panelists, and I'll probably do it one by one as you go, rather than doing it all at once. But also introduce the format. We're going to have a series of questions. They're very open-ended questions. They're designed to get discussion and debate going that address the broader question of who decides about war. And actually, yeah, I would just ask if somebody could close the door back there too. I know there's a lot of background noise, and we want to have a good discussion in here. Thank you. And essentially those questions, and I'll preview them for everybody here, are, first of all, what is the problem? What is the problem with the current structure of the United States military, with the current allocation of war powers, with the way in which war powers are actually exercised in the United States? If there is a problem in terms of the United States being today the dominant military superpower in the world, which I think everybody here agrees is the problem, right? Then how do we get into this mess? So let's try to identify the problem, and we're going to begin with that. Secondly, asking what are some of the solutions? In terms of policy solutions, to the extent that there's something that can be done in terms of legal change, in terms of structural change in the United States, in terms of cultural change in the United States, what are the two most important reforms that we could achieve in our lifetimes? I think we have long lives to live here, that would actually make a real difference in terms of preventing future wars of empire, repeats of Iraq and Afghanistan and Somalia, and so many expeditions that have characterized most of the last century for the United States. And then finally, how do we get there? How do we actually achieve those reforms? So, very simple set of questions. Each panelist is going to take a couple of minutes to address each one of them, and then we'll have an opportunity for discussion. Does that sound good? Sounds good. All right. So good. So I'm going to start off with the gentleman to my left. This is Kevin Zeese. I want to shake his hand. Executive Director of Voters for Peace, and has been active on many important issues, not only issues involving war and peace, but also broader questions of democracy around voting rights, around preventing stolen elections, in terms of fighting for election reform, for the rights of independent parties. He hails from Maryland, and if I had been a Maryland resident, he would have been my candidate it was the United States Senate, is that correct? Yeah, several years ago. So please welcome Kevin Zeese. Please, Kevin, tell us what is the problem that we're dealing with here?
Well, you know, the United States is an interesting situation in that we are probably the largest empire in world history. You know, we have more than 1,000 bases in countries all over the world, and at its peak, the British Empire had like 35 bases. We have more than 1,000. And despite us being this gigantic empire that spends as much money on war and weapons as the whole world combined, most people in the United States don't even know we're an empire. So it's kind of this secret empire among its own people. And you know, people wonder why we're losing jobs overseas. Well, you have client states overseas that are part of the empire. You got to keep happy. That's what empires need to do, to keep their clients happy. So we're an empire. I think when you're an empire, you develop a war economy, and that's what we've developed. It's not Dwight Eisenhower, when he was in his farewell speech in the Oval Office, warned us about the military-industrial complex. But by that point, we'd already been an empire for many years. You can go back to the 1890s, really, and you could even look at Manifest Destiny as part of that process. But going internationally to the Philippines in the 1890s was really a major step towards that empire mentality. And I think that's one reason why we're in constant wars. Because you spend so much on military as we do, you end up having to use it. And our empire is not just military. Of course, it's important to know it's an economic empire. We use the IMF and the World Bank to help to control countries as well. And so it's a combination of those different powers. What's unfortunate, one of the things that's unfortunate about this, among many, is that it kind of turns on its head the intent of the constitutional framers. In that what they wanted to avoid was a unitary executive, a monarch, an emperor of our empire, the imperial president being the one person that makes a decision. They gave the power to a broader set to Congress to declare war. We've stopped doing that. And so we're almost a war on automatic pilot. I mean, it's like, it's just, wars almost become inevitable because of the amount of money we spend on militarism, the lack of power that Congress has kept for itself within the Constitution to give up their responsibility, and then you have, of course, the incredible power of the economic forces that profit from war, and with billion-dollar presidential campaigns that essentially select the president, the choices that we have. People are given two acceptable choices, acceptable to the concentrated corporate power, including the military-industrial complex, that we get a president who is prone to doing what his backers suggest. And so it really has become a war on autopilot to protect the empire.
Thank you. That's a great way to start, and very succinct too. And I'm going to turn it over now to somebody who it's been my pleasure to work with pretty closely on the Bring the Guard Home campaign, which is now Safeguard the Guard. Leah Bolger. She is National Vice President of Veterans for Peace, former Navy commander, retired, and hails from Corvallis, Oregon. And Leah has been a leader in the Bring the Guard Home campaign for several years now nationally. She serves on our National Steering Committee. She's co-chair of the campaign, and she's also been a leader in the Oregon campaign. This is a state-by-state campaign to reform National Guard law. So Leah, what is the problem? And then we'll get to what do we need to do.
Well, I would definitely agree with what Kevin says about the problem of how decision making happens is way too much influenced by corporations, by the military-industrial complex, and as long as we have that profit motive involved in wars, it's to those industries' benefit to continue wars and to wage wars, then. It's going to be virtually impossible to change the way we're doing things because in our system the money is what has the money has the power. So by the book we all know the Constitution says Section 1 or Article 1, Section 8 that Congress has the power to declare war. Congress has the power to fund war, and they could stop it or start it as they like, but too much of the decision making, and in fact, it's almost it almost describes the problem when you say, in terms of the way decisions about war and peace are made, because the fact that we are deciding to go to war is kind of an iteration of the problem that George Bush decided to go to war, and then we tried to find circumstances to make that legitimate. But so when we're deciding to go to war and we're ignoring the laws and the just war theory and the international conventions and making decisions based on what would be good for our empire, then that is a huge problem. Now, once we go to war, how we use our military, and this is, I'm talking about the Guard Home program, our military has three components. There's the active duty branch, there's the reserves, and then there is the National Guard. And in times past, the active duty were on the front lines. The reserves were the backup. They were reserves. And the National Guard, people joined to work in their local communities to help their state, to protect the people and property of their state. But because of this overwhelming emphasis on war and empire and militarism, and we don't have the strength, the troop strength, to fight these wars without the National Guard. So the whole mission of the National Guard has been usurped and made a frontline fighting force. So there's a lot of problems with that too, and I can expand on that later. But yeah, it's not. Our government is not using the National Guard the way it was intended to be used, and whether it's a democratic decision or not, it's not good for our country, and it's not good for the world.
Thank you. Sitting to Leah's left is David Swanson, and I think many of you will know David for his work on impeachment, but also as an anti-war activist. You recently had a book, and you want to promote the book here on camera for us?
Sure.
Where can people buy it?
It's called Daybreak: Undoing the Imperial Presidency and Forming a More Perfect Union, and you should buy it at your local independent bookstore, but you can buy it anywhere.
There you go. At one point it was at the top of the charts, I think, on Amazon when it first came out. But it's I think David will tell you that the work that he did and really pioneered during the Bush-Cheney administration is still, unfortunately, having to continue forward. David founded a blog and a website and eventually a movement that was known as After Downing Street until recently, and you can still find it at afterdowningstreet.org. You can find more of his work at davidswanson, is it .com? .org, that's good. And he really helped to initiate and to lead and to coordinate a lot of the impeachment efforts against Cheney and Bush and their administrations. So please welcome me.
Thank you, Ben. It's great to be here, and of course they should still be impeached, as should the current bunch, as should lower-hanging fruit like judges like Jay Bybee, who legalized not just torture but illegal aggressive wars. I agree with everything that's been said so far, so this is going to be a rather boring dispute here, but I think that, that this is the one area where the framers of the Constitution were way out ahead of us. They're centuries, literally centuries behind us in so many ways, and yet they got this one right and we've got it wrong. They very carefully put the war power in the Congress, in the first branch, in the legislature, and we moved beyond that internationally in ways including the United Nations Charter, which is the supreme law of our land as a treaty we are party to, which in fact, as Leah was getting at, doesn't allow you to decide to go have a war. War is a crime, which is the new name for After Downing Street, warisacrime.org, with two very narrow exceptions, and one is literally fighting self-defense, and the other is with a special authorization from the UN. And our current wars, of course, have neither of those. The problem in terms of who decides about war is, of course, that the president does. And on 2 days ago, on Tuesday, I went to a speech that the House Majority Leader, Steny Hoyer, was giving about the budget and finances in a huge room with the whole Washington press corps. And I carefully sat, deep in this long, narrow room so they couldn't possibly get me out there without a big scene. And he gets up there and talks about where we're going to have to cut money. Social Security, Medicare, things people need and care about, we're going to have to cut. And he brags about cutting particular weapon systems. And I asked him, Mr. Hoyer, how can you mention these particular weapon systems that you're cutting and forget to point out that you're actually expanding the overall military budget, and on top of that, you're continuing to escalate and fund these wars off the books entirely? How could those have slipped your mind? And he has no answer whatsoever, but says, yeah, you're right, those should be on the table for consideration. And he goes on to say, but what we're really going to have to do is to wait for the President's Commission to tell us where to cut. And then if the President's Commission produces any proposals whatsoever, and if they pass the Senate, we'll pass them in the House, whatever they might be. And he talks about how you can limit spending, how you could cut spending, and he literally says only a president can cut spending. And you know, it wasn't still my turn to speak, but I asked him, Mr. Hoyer, if you don't pass it, how does the president sign it? You know, and he stares at me like a donkey in the headlights for 10 seconds and says nothing, nothing. This is, you know, and the next day, yesterday, he goes out to the media and says, we have to pass this emergency supplemental funding of this escalation of war in Afghanistan, which he doesn't call an escalation anymore because it's already happened, in order to save those troops on the ground, right? So predictably, and as many of us predicted better part of a year ago, if you allow an escalation to go ahead pre-funding, then when you get around to funding it, these people are going to claim that they have to fund it for those troops on the ground, as if they wouldn't get their dinner or their bullets, you know. Whereas, of course, if you didn't fund it, it would actually mean having to bring them back home. And so this is how Congress members think now. They think that they can only talk to the president. They can't do things, and so they literally cannot stop funding, because only a president can do that. They are obliged to fund anything he tells them to fund, and then if he chooses to stop it, that's up to him. And they literally can't decide war policies. The war policies roll ahead, and they're obliged to fund them. And I think you asked in the question, where does this originate? It originates in having two parties, which goes back to my neighbor Thomas Jefferson's presidency, where you have the president telling the members of his party in Congress what to do, rather than the other way around. It goes to the money that we're working on getting out. It goes to the media, which, you know, not a single one of these so-called reporters, and there were hundreds of them in that room on Tuesday, asked a decent question or wrote anything worthwhile. And it goes to our new policy of looking forward and not enforcing laws, and not impeaching and not prosecuting. And I think we can talk about all those areas.
Excellent, thank you. And now we'll move to the gentleman at the furthest end of the table there.
The far left.
The far left.
It's a good spot.
It's a good spot to be.
It's on the far right.
It's all a matter of perspective. I met this man maybe 10 years ago, and I think at that point, George, it was maybe the third or fourth lifetime of activism that you were entering into. He's got a long and deep history in many different movements, done a lot of work with the homeless, with veterans, was very much involved in the civil rights and black power movements of his generation, and we served together in the Green Party as well, so that's our common roots. But George Martin currently, and for some time, has been co-chair of United for Peace and Justice, which I think probably everybody here knows is the largest anti-war coalition in the United States. He may be the best known international figure on the panel. He travels all over the world doing organizing, bringing ties between the peace movement and anti-war movement here in the United States, together with folks in other countries who are struggling against U.S. military bases and for demilitarization worldwide. And he was supposed to be the opening speaker on Tuesday, when apparently some other fellow named George Martin decided that he was the man who was listed on the agenda. So I found that quite amusing when I heard that. But if you missed him then, now you have an opportunity to hear from George. So George, what is the problem that we're trying to deal with here?
Well, thank you, Ben. And just a little correction. I stepped down as co-chair of United for Peace and Justice last December.
Okay.
And still lots of stuff going on. Ben is the one who got me into this national work and national efforts, and I thank you for that.
You're sure you want to thank me, huh?
I want to thank you. I want to thank you. Because what we're all about here is the most important thing in terms of our country, you know. And I've come some over time, and you know, I'm a love child from World War II, and I used to be a Negro, then I was black, and I'm African American. But you know, it used to be said that while we're in war, we make money off of it. Now it's said we go to war to make money. And if we look back over this history, and I agree with so much that has happened, you know, there's those paper trails. There's a Project for a New American Century, which in the 90s said, let's get ready for this. We're going to do this, you know. And with that will, it came. And at the same time, you know, as we came out in the early days to stop this, with tremendous power, mentioned to be the second strongest power on earth, the chips were stacked against us. And literally, and one of the reasons in this piece when we get compared to the Vietnam War and why don't we have people on the streets and why this and that, we put more people on the streets during this Iraq War. But the struggle is the stronger corporate ties to the military and to our government. So much stronger that it obliviates the American public from knowing the truth. And then at the same time, the attitude of the media and the government that our average citizen doesn't know anything about war and foreign policy and shouldn't have anything to say about it. And we ran through that in terms of the ballot referendums across the country and the arguments that we had with our politicians. Oh, what do you know about this stuff? Leave it to Washington. And at the same time, in leaving it to Washington, you know, the night before the preemptive vote for attack on Iraq, Georgetown students surveyed every office in Congress. In the American citizenry, through fax, through telephone calls, through letters, was 10-1 against war. 10-1. And literally the Congress went and swept it through. You know. So I get back to the point in terms of part of this problem is who does our Congress represent? And I'm sure we're going to get into that more later on. You know, but to me that's critical in terms of who do they represent, where are the ties. I remember meeting with Bill Gould from the executive director of the Democratic Party Progressive Caucus. And I put the question directly to him. In terms of our American public and people who vote and put Congress people in, how does that weigh against the corporate lobbyists, the special interest, the military-industrial complex, APEC? And he said there's no comparison, George. That's the damn problem. Because the American public doesn't have the say, and it's these other entities that have the say and the influence. And so I think it's critical to understand that, especially as we move into the next section about, you know, how do we deal with it. Thank you.